Welcome back, everybody. Nice to see you all again. And we have a couple of new faces. Brittany and Martha are new, and we'll all get to know them as we continue to get to know each other. We're going to start tonight with a meditation, and we'll start most nights going forward in this way. This meditation is a little longer than anything we did last week, and it is one of the 3 core formal meditation practices of this curriculum. I will ask you all to find a posture in which you can be comfortable for the length of the meditation. And once you're comfortable, you can let your eyes gently close, partially or fully. And start by taking a few slow, easy breaths, inviting any unnecessary tension in your body to release. And if you like, placing a hand over your heart or another soothing place as a reminder that we're bringing not only awareness, but affectionate awareness to our breathing and to ourselves. You can leave your hand there or let it rest anytime. And now beginning to notice your breathing in your body. Feeling your body breathe in and feeling your body breathe out. Perhaps noticing how your body is nourished on the in-breath and then relaxes with the out-breath. And just letting your body breathe you. There's nothing you need to do. And now noticing the rhythm of your breathing. Flowing in, flowing out. Taking some time to really feel the rhythm of your breathing. Perhaps inclining your attention toward your breathing as you might toward a beloved child or a special pet or a dear friend. And now feeling your whole body subtly moving with the breath. like the movement of the sea. Your mind will naturally wander. Like a curious child or a little puppy. When that happens, just gently returning to the rhythm of your breathing. And if you notice there's a sense of watching your breath, see if you can let that go and just be with your breath, feeling it. Allowing your whole body to be gently rocked and soothed, internally soothed by your breathing. And if you like, even giving yourself over to your breathing. Just breathing, being breathing. And if your mind wanders, just gently inviting your attention back to the breath. And now, gently releasing your attention to your breathing, sitting quietly in your own experience, and allowing yourself to feel whatever you're feeling, and to be just as you are. Take a second to feel into what your body is like right now. And see if you appreciate any difference than when we first sat down. I'm going to read a poem. In general, going forward in the class, when I read short poetry, I will read it once and then read it again. This is My Balm by Jane O'Shea. I close my eyes and sigh, and here I am, lying in the hammock in my heart, moving gently with the soft air of my breath. When I fall from my head, past my words, I'm caught lovingly by the hammock of my heart and rocked to its rhythmic beat. It is my peace, my rest, my quiet, cradled in the hammock of my heart. It is constant, it is safe to be held in the hammock of my heart. No place to go, nothing to do, nobody to please. It is my altar, my blessing, my balm, here in the hammock of my heart. I close my eyes and sigh, and here I am lying in the hammock in my heart, moving gently with the soft air of my breath. When I fall from my head past my words, I'm caught lovingly by the hammock of my heart and rocked to its rhythmic beat. It is my peace, my rest, my quiet, cradled in the hammock of my heart. It is constant, it is safe to be held in the hammock of my heart. No place to go, nothing to do, nobody to please. It is my altar, my blessing, my balm here in the hammock of my heart. Taking just a minute to reflect on our meditation practice, I want you to consider the questions: what did I notice? What did I feel? And how am I feeling now? And you can take notes if you'd like, or you can just reflect on that in your head. While you're doing that, you might have noticed during the meditation that your mind wandered. Minds do that. All minds do that. Try not to judge yourself harshly for that. And if you do, try to be compassionate about the fact that you're judging yourself harshly for your mind wandering. And we'll just take a few minutes to share in the group anything that you would like to share about what you noticed or what you felt.
Awareness. Her gaze is so constant, our every move watched with such affection. A ceaseless vigil without condition or agenda, silent, patient, unrelenting in her embrace. There is endless room in the heart of this lover, infinite space for whatever foolishness we may toss her way. But she is also crafty, this one, a thief who will steal away everything we ever cherished, all our beliefs, all our ideas, all our philosophies, until nothing is left but her shimmering wakefulness, the simple love for what it is.
So we'll take a few minutes just to talk about home practice and what that was like for people. Just a general reminder, we talked about some of this last week, but I'm always very interested in your direct experience of the practice, how it felt to you in your body or in your emotional realm. I'm always interested in whether or not you're able to draw kindness toward your experience in yourself. And as we have discussions, we'll just always remember that we don't need fixing, that we don't need to give advice. And we try not to crosstalk, which just means talking on top of someone else's comment. There might be, in discussions like this, questions that come up that are conceptual. And if that happens, we'll start a list on the board. We'll call it the parking lot. And it'll be a place that we put those kinds of questions. And then I can answer them in our follow-up emails. Or we may have time on our retreat day to do some of those. But we'll try to keep most of our discussion about the experience of the practice. Tonight, we're going to talk a lot about mindfulness. Last week, we sort of set up the basis of understanding self-compassion. And both, like we talked about last week, mindfulness and self-compassion are integral to this course. But we're going to spend a little more time specifically looking at mindfulness and comparing and contrasting a little bit mindfulness to self-compassion. We'll do some practicing. This class, like last class, has a little bit more didactic stuff, and the course gets more and more experiential. So there'll be good experiential stuff in this class, but if you're feeling a little frustrated, like it's a little too didactic, and you were hoping for something else, that ratio shifts a little bit in all the remaining classes. So bear with some of the conceptual stuff. We are really trying to look at the map a little bit before we walk around in the territory. A couple words about mind wandering. Oh my gosh, Did you all have your mind wander like most of the time or a lot of the time, right? It is normal and really important in a mindful self-compassion practice to note that with a little bit of lightness and not be like, ugh, I cannot concentrate at all. It's like I said last week, the skill is the noticing you're over here and coming back. The skill is not to stay in concentration on your breath or anything else. It's just to be able to bring yourself back over and over to the present moment, because we tend to suffer less in the present moment. All the thinking about the past and all the projecting into the future tends to be where we do more of our suffering. So just being able to bring yourself back, that's really what we're trying to get good at. So be kind to yourself when you notice that. People have studied mind wandering, and in 2010 there was an article in Science magazine that tried to quantify how much of the time we spend in our waking day with our mind wandering. Anybody have a guess for what the average person in this study of 2,250 people had for time wandering? Percentage of their waking hours? About 50% of the time, the average person had their mind wandering. It's kind of a cool study. They had all these volunteers, and they would send them texts at random intervals and ask them, are you actively focused on what you're doing right now? And then they would just reply back. Some tasks had less mind wandering associated with it, some as little as 30%, but there was only one activity that had less mind wandering than 30%. It had only 10% mind wandering. Any idea what that would have been? Sex. People's, in this study, 10% of the time their mind was wandering during sex. That seems kind of remarkable to me. So why does our mind wander so much? I mean, it seems sort of wasteful. We have this great, massive brain. Half the time it's wandering off. It turns out that when we're in mind wandering mode, there is a set of structures in our brain, in the center of our brain, that run from the front to the back, that are really active during mind wandering. And during focus tasks, they're quiet. That set of structures is called the default mode network. And scientists have determined that that default mode network has a few important functions. They believe that it is the home of our sense of self. It is the place that allows us to remember our existence in the past and to project our existence into the future. And it's thought to be really important for safety and survival. We are able to learn, remember, and project ourselves forward to not do dangerous things from the past. So evolutionarily, it's thought to be integral for survival. It's not very great for happiness. It's really about detecting threats. And we spend a lot of time, half the time, about in this mode of being ready to detect threat. So we're really nicely hardwired for survival, but we're not so nicely hardwired for happiness. Research shows that mindfulness decreases activity in your default mode network when you're doing a mindfulness practice and when you're not. So doing this practice globally reduces the activity in those structures of the brain, which is pretty cool. So that's a bit about why our minds wander. What is mindfulness? Do any of you have a definition that you carry around for mindfulness? There are many, so you couldn't give a wrong one. Non-judgmental awareness. Excellent. That gets at the heart of it. John Kabat-Zinn says, in many more words, but the same idea, paying attention in a particular way, meaning on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. I did the teacher training for this course with an awesome young guy who was an autistic person who teaches yoga to neuroatypical other people. And he was just super charming. And he said, it's being aware in the present moment without judging it. Pretty much, that's what it is. Or you could say it's knowing what we're experiencing while we're experiencing it. Or you could say it's open awareness. These are all fine definitions, but really, mindfulness is pre-conceptual awareness. It's awareness before we even put a tag or a name to it. So it's perceiving the sound without having to name the sound and think about it and notice that it's really going to probably mess up my recording because it's cars that are right out there and there's a lot of... It's before that. It's pre-conceptual. It's the sense of sensation in your body before you go, oh, I think I'm hungry. So words fall a little bit short in the definition of mindfulness. And we're going to do a short exercise where we try to notice that. So I am going to have you close your eyes for just a minute, partially or fully, whatever you prefer. And I invite you to take a moment just to listen to the sounds in the environment. Letting the sounds come to you, noting what you hear, one sound after another, with a little inner nod of recognition, but there's no need to name what you hear. And now I'm going to ask that you open your eyes, but allow your eyes to have a soft, really wide angle gaze. Really trying to take in the entire breadth of your vision all the way out to the periphery. And again, just notice what you see. You don't have to name it. It might be a shadow here or brightness there or a lot of gray carpet. But just taking in that full breadth of your vision. And I'm going to have you gently rub your hands together. And while you do that, just noticing how one hand feels against the other. And then if you don't mind, smell your hands. And see if you notice any smells. Staying aware that you're smelling. And lastly, considering if there are any flavors or tastes in your mouth. So that's really what mindfulness is. It's really pre-conceptual awareness, open awareness. And we have lots of little moments. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Did anybody else have a really hard time not naming
Oh, yeah,
all of those things?
totally. Absolutely.
Okay.
I think for me, sound especially comes right with meaning. What y'all think of the visual thing? Any reaction to that experience? I personally love that practice Because every time I do it, I am so aware of how much of my visual field I ignore my whole life. Like, this is all I pay attention to. Mm-hmm. And if you try to have a wide angle view, there's a whole bunch of stuff you can see and perceive. It's not like it's all a blurry mess over in the periphery. So I love that every time I do it. It's a fun one. So moments of mindfulness, right? We all have them. We all do have moments when we are attentive to what's going on. The goal in this course and this kind of training is to see if we can create more moments and bring warmth to those moments. We get to watch a video. Some of you may have seen this. This is about 12 years old. It was made by Radiolab. Have any of you seen that before? It's been around a while. I've seen it a few times. Did you have favorite parts? Any image that really resonated? Emily Dickinson said, "To live is so startling, it leaves but little room for other occupations." If we were noticing all the time, that would surely be true. And Chris Germer says, "The experience of mindfulness is much more than simple awareness. When mindfulness is in full bloom, it's warm and tender. Our lives can appear very beautiful, impermanent, and poignant," which I think is what they're showing in that video. We're going to do an exercise, an informal practice, in fact. This will be something to take into the week. We're going to stand up. Or if you prefer, you can stay seated. You don't have to stand. You can do it with sitting down. As you get to your desired position, I invite you to feel the soles of your feet. Feel the contact that they're making with the surface that they're resting upon. Maybe spread your toes out. Really let them root into the floor. You might shift your weight back and forth, or if you're sitting side to side with your knees. Continuing to notice what that feels like in the soles of your feet. Maybe make little circles with your knees. Feeling how the floor supports your whole body. And when your mind wanders from the soles of your feet, as we know it will do, gently bringing your attention back to the sensations on the soles of your feet. For those of you who are standing, I invite you to take a few steps, noticing as you slowly step the sensations on the bottom of your feet. How it feels to lift one foot off the ground, set your heel back down. And keep taking just a few steps more. Perhaps noticing how small the surface area of your feet is. And how your feet support the rest of you as your feet are supported by the floor. Maybe even allowing a moment of gratitude for the hard work that your feet are doing, which we surely take for granted most of the time. And as you step or even just lift and set down your feet in your place, perhaps allowing your foot to leave an imprint in the floor of kindness or peace or happiness, calm, health, whatever you wish to cultivate in your life. Returning to your chair. You can sit back down if you like. And I invite you to expand your awareness to your entire body, letting yourself feel whatever you're feeling, and letting yourself be just as you are. How was that for people to be anchored in your feet? Imagine some of you have done something like that before. How was it today? We'll start with a soft landing, and this time it is a little bit of advice from a guy named Bob Sharples. He's a meditation teacher in San Francisco Bay Area. And he says, don't meditate to fix yourself, to heal yourself, improve yourself, or redeem yourself. Rather, do it as an act of radical self-acceptance, a gesture of deep, warm friendship to yourself. Let go of the subtle aggression of self-improvement, the endless guilt of not doing enough. Let this sit be a break from the ceaseless rounds of becoming, improving, and trying. Sit down with yourself as an act of love. No agenda. However you are is enough. The rest of the evening, we get to talk about some of my favorite things. So the next topic for discussion is resistance. Resistance is the opposite of mindfulness. Resistance is struggling against what is rather than accepting what is. And it's a major ingredient in suffering. This is the equation according to smarter people than me. Suffering is pain times resistance. But pain is unavoidable. We will all have pain. That's the human condition. This is optional. Or maybe not optional as human animals, but it's manageable. If this is the equation, the thinking goes, if you have a small bit of pain, like someone cuts you off in traffic, and you get fixated on it, and you ruminate about it, and you get caught up in thinking about how many stupid people there are in the world and what kind of an ass would do that. And I mean, of course, it's people like that make rush hour in Bozeman so terrible. Your resistance to what is, which is having been cut off, is really high. And your suffering is the area between the two. So a little bit of pain can create a lot of suffering. Mm-hmm. And you could have a really big pain like, I don't know, a foot that does not behave as a foot should.
Yes.
And if you can manage with tools like mindfulness and self-compassion, your resistance, you can keep something that's a bigger pain in the same realm of suffering as if you ruminate about a small pain. So this we're going to learn to modify, because this is hard to modify. It's inevitable that we will have painful things occur. So resistance refers to the struggle that occurs when we believe our moment-to-moment experience should be other than it is. How might you know if you were resisting? What might that look like? What is a sign that you are fighting against your current moment-to-moment experience? Perseverance, yeah. Yeah, anxiety, for sure. Anger, irritation, yeah. Irritation, judgment. If you're judging someone else or yourself, you're pretty surely resisting your moment-to-moment experience. And that's human to do, but if we can have some mindfulness and awareness about that, and we have some tools to modify that, then we can use self-judgment or judgment of others even as a trigger to notice that we're feeling resistance. And it is a little bit like saying this is a moment of suffering. If you notice there's resistance, changes. It's quite something. It can really move stuff. And maybe not make it go away, but it will draw our attention to it, and then we can see it change. In this course, they like lots of little aphorisms. One being, what we can feel, we can heal. So if you have it stuffed away in a corner of your being, and it's a past difficulty that has stuck with you, and we don't open toward it, we don't allow ourselves to feel it, then it's probably not going to change. David Whyte, the poet from last week who wrote The Start Close In, was featured a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, on Being. Do you all know that? It's a Minnesota Public Radio show that is now part of NPR. And he was speaking about resistance, and he said this. He said, I think self-compassion has to do with the ability to understand and even to cultivate a sense of humor about all the ways we just don't want to be here, in work, in parenting, in relationships. To embody your reluctance, and therefore once it's embodied, to allow it to actually start to change into something else. Things only solidify when they're kept at a distance. As soon as they're embodied, they actually start to take on a kind of seasonality. And you're actually, by embodying it, by feeling it fully, allowing it to start to change into something else. That is really at the heart of what this practice is about. That's where we can really transform past difficulties, past hurts. We can learn to use skills of grounding to help keep us safe so we don't get overwhelmed, so that we can turn towards some difficulty and drop our resistance a little bit. And as soon as you do that, things change. The crummy foot becomes tolerable. There are certainly examples where change is very small and very incremental and takes a lot of time. But there are some examples too where it's not. And just allowing, noticing with mindfulness, turning toward with some warmth, and allowing, letting your resistance drop, can be where transformation in this stuff happens. I have a video for you. That's pretty much a really nice depiction of resistance. What we resist persists. If I haven't said that already this course, you will hear that multiple times for sure. The good news is we can practice, but eventually we can make progress and see things change. So we're going to do an exercise. I'm going to have you take out paper and pen. If you don't have paper and pen, there is some on the table over there. After this exercise, we're going to pair up and share a little bit of the content. Not a lot, but a little bit of the content. So as I ask you to think of a situation, just be aware that you choose something you might feel able to share a little bit about. And as always, we can pass if we need to when opportunities to share come about. I invite you to think of a current situation in your life where you feel that resisting the reality of something painful is causing you unnecessary suffering and may actually be making things worse than they need to be. It might be something as simple as procrastinating on a big project, resenting something about your current job, harboring anger toward your neighbor's barking dog, and like I said, we'll be sharing this in pairs, so choose an example that you feel comfortable talking a little bit about with another person, and then write down that situation. And I'll give you a minute or so to choose something and get it written down. And then ask yourself, how is my resistance manifesting? It might be physical tension or agitation, anger, distractibility, spacing out, criticizing yourself or others, overworking, overeating. Can you describe it? Can you describe how your resistance is manifesting itself? And then consider, is it possible that your resistance is benefiting you in some way? Could it be helping? And if you can think of ways that it might be helping you or protecting you in some way, please write those down. And then answer the question for yourself, how might resistance not be serving you? How might it be making things worse? And how might your life be easier if you were able to stop or reduce your resisting? And lastly, consider how mindfulness and self-compassion might help lessen your resistance to the situation. Maybe using components of the self-compassion break, validating, seeing common humanity, bringing kindness to yourself. And as always, those written notes are for you only. But I'm going to ask you to find a partner, and we'll have about 4 minutes each where we'll share as much as you would like to from that exercise. And once you're paired up, I'll ring a bell to start and mark the middle and so forth. As always, we'll avoid giving advice or trying to fix. We'll just practice compassionate listening. Such good conversation. So coming back to the large group, what did you discover? What did you learn? The next thing we're going to chat about is the sometimes bad feelings that come up when we practice self-compassion. As we've just started to experiment last week and this week, have there been times, rather, raise your hand if there have been times when practicing self-compassion felt good. And raise your hand if there were times when it felt pretty neutral, like not that much of anything. Me too. And were there times for any of you, raise your hand if practicing self-compassion made you feel bad? Yeah, more emotional, uncomfortably in touch with emotions, right? Like more than you cared to deal with at a particular moment. That is a really common, especially early consequence of a self-compassion practice, especially early. I still feel that, but I am led to believe that that becomes less over time, and I think that's true in my experience. And that gets back to that idea that when you love yourself unconditionally, when you turn toward yourself with warmth, it tends to reveal times when you were not given what you needed, when you were not taken care of. When you start to try to take care of yourself, it brings up the hurt that is created when other people didn't take care of us and we needed them to. In this program, that gets called Backdraft, and the metaphor, of course, is a firefighting one. If a fire is enclosed and separated off from oxygen, it eats up all the oxygen and then it's pretty dormant. But as soon as you open a door and oxygen rushes in, it's a big flare. And, there are little hurts and big hurts in all of us that when we've got them all sealed away in a little corner where we keep all of our hurts, it's quiet. But when we start to not only look toward that, but warm up toward it, warm up to ourselves, then big feeling can come from that. So that's a really normal consequence of a self-compassion practice. And we want to manage it so that it's safe for us to do this. and have strategies that prevent us from becoming overwhelmed when that happens. And we'll talk about what some of those are. But backdraft is what we will call the distress that arises when we give ourselves compassion. There's a second metaphor that they offer, which is when you go outside in the winter and your hands get really cold. They don't hurt. You're outside, you're working, they're cold. You might notice that. But when you come inside and they start to warm up, then there can be discomfort in that. Anybody want to offer what they might think an example of backdraft would be? Remembering that we said it was that feeling bad when we give ourselves compassion. The one that comes up for me a lot is that I'm alone or I don't belong. Shame, fear, anxiety, bodily sensations, pain, tension, stress. We talked about a lot of those. But the cool thing about backdraft is, like trying to modify resistance, it's part of getting better. If you don't ever turn toward that deep hurt or that not so deep hurt, it is not likely to change, right? Like David Whyte says, it's going to be solid. And if you can turn toward it and tolerate or manage the feeling that comes off of it, then it develops a sort of seasonality, and things will change, even without a lot of effort from us. Chris Germer, who's a very funny guy, says, backdraft feels like the kaboom, but it's really kabloom. And self-compassion ends up being a way that we can reparent ourselves or re-experience things that were difficult in the past, even if the hurt was not caused by our parents. I don't mean that. I mean when we have not gotten what we needed from those we are in relationship with, we can go back and provide some of that care to ourselves. And as long as we can do it in a safe way where we can tolerate the backdraft, then there's really great potential in that kind of practice. Gives us a secure base to work from, even if we didn't get that at certain parts of our life or development. And this class is resource building. So a lot of our discussion is going to focus on how we are developing tools, but then putting them to use, pointing out how each of us is putting those tools to use so that we can all learn from each other. Like, oh, that was cool, right? Other people's experience will help grow our own resources. What else about backdraft? They do say that the more capacity you have to hold yourself and your experience in a loving way, the less problematic backdraft will get. There's a 4th century Christian saint, Alma Syncletica, and she wrote, this is a long time ago, it's just like building a fire. At first it's smoky and your eyes sting and water, but later you get the desired result. It's about the practice. So how do we work with backdraft to stay safe about it? We want to make space so that we can allow backdraft to percolate in the background and see if it'll dissipate. So if we notice backdrafty feelings that are kind of uncomfortable, the first thing we can do is just wait a minute, just see if a little bit of time won't cause things to start to move. Sometimes just maintaining your awareness, even in discomfort, can allow things to start to change. If you've given it a little space and time and it hasn't seemed to settle, then we want to reduce what we're doing in the exercise. We want to do less of whatever is bringing that up. So less attention, less warmth, backing off from the practice a little bit, and see what happens. If we back off and it's still not dissipating, and we're still uncomfortable, then we want to regulate our emotions in some other way. Either using mindfulness, like feeling the soles of our feet, or even distraction as a secondary strategy. Make your grocery list. It is okay to do that. If we're feeling overwhelmed, there's nothing great that happens once we're brushing up against being overwhelmed. So we try to, if we notice it, have a little patience first, back off on the practice a little bit, and if it's still not comfortable, then grounding and using your mindfulness strategies. And sometimes self-compassion strategies too. Self-compassion strategies in daily life are sort of like the usual self-care things that we do. And that can be a place to retreat from Backdraft. A cup of tea, a bath, a professional massage. Those are things to be expected. Backdraft, some difficult feelings are definitely going to come up. They already have. This used to be discussed in way later sessions, and they realized through the teaching of it that this is an issue really from the beginning. So they moved it all the way up to the second session. So we should expect it, but we should also be attentive to managing our own safety as we engage that. We're going to do a couple of informal practices and then one more discussion. So mindfulness in daily life is a task that will be part of your homework or your, home practice. I like that better. It's not homework. You don't have to do it. This is not 4th grade. So the idea is that you will pick an ordinary activity that you do every day, maybe more than once a day, and choose 1 or 2 sensory experiences within that activity and really try to immerse yourself in that experience when you do that thing. It might be brushing your teeth and you're noticing the flavor of your toothpaste and really trying to immerse yourself in that sensory experience and savor it a little bit and let that continue through the whole week. I like to use this whenever I pet my dog. I have a big Whyte dog who's just the best thing ever, and she really likes to have her cheeks under her ears right here scratched. And so whenever I do that, which is more than once or twice a day, I try to really stop myself and just notice what it feels like to have my fingers in her fur, which is really hair, and it's very curly, and it doesn't shed, and it's perfect. And also what it feels like to have her look at me when I do that, because it's super rich, and you could miss it. You could just I could scratch my dog and move on with my day and not get that dose of her looking at me. She loves me best. So picking an activity, focusing on 1 or 2 sensory aspects, savoring, and bringing some warmth to that experience. So I will invite you to think for a minute about what that might be for you, and then maybe just share any ideas that come to your mind. Coffee. Oh, yeah, I can see lots of yummy sensory experiences in coffee. Brushing teeth, yeah. Lunch in the middle of the day, yeah. Another informal practice for this week. So this week we'll have last week's stuff to play with, soothing touch, self-compassion break, and then we added soles of the feet, mindfulness, the thing we just discussed, mindfulness in daily life. And the last thing we'll add is just attending to self-compassion in daily life, which is what we would often call self-care. I'm interested in self-care that you already do for yourself, and I'm interested in what you might like to do for self-care for yourself. Can we make a list as a group of what some self-care things might be? self-compassion in daily life. We talked about massage and coffee and tea. What else? Chocolate, hand soap and dog food, end of day shower, bath, yeah, absolutely. Music, yeah. Poetry. So maybe tonight, before you go to bed, make a list of a few things you're already doing as self-care. Pat yourself on the back for that. And then make a list of 1 or 2 or 3 that you might like to incorporate this week. And without pressure, see how that goes. And with the little bit of time we have left, I want to just talk a little bit about the difference between mindfulness and self-compassion. This discussion comes out of the fact that the mindfulness-based stress reduction course has a lot of implied self-compassion in it, because when mindfulness is fully present, it is warm. And in the mindful self-compassion curriculum, we're very actively cultivating the compassion part, and there is a lot of mindfulness in it. Mindfulness does a few things within the mindful self-compassion curriculum. Like we talked about last week, if we don't know we're suffering, we're nowhere. We can't apply warmth and caring if we don't have any awareness, if we're just swept away on the tsunami of day-to-day life. It's central to what we're doing in that way. It's also really important when we get overwhelmed. Mindfulness is often the strategies that we're going to go to ground and calm ourselves. Being able to get to your present moment experience can take us out of emotional overwhelm, because once we get thinking forward and backward, we suffer more. So it's important in that way. And of course, it helps us cultivate an appreciation of what's happening within our body, which is really important for us to be able to bring compassion to those sensations too. And it can also have a really important role in balancing compassion and calm. And I think this is best said by Christian Wolf and Greg Serpa. This is a book called The Clinicians' Guide to Teaching Mindfulness. It's a super excellent book, I think, for anyone who's interested in mindfulness. It has a nice summary of good research, which it won't surprise you, I really liked. But it's just very well written. She is a Dharma person, so a Buddhist. He is a therapist, a clinical psychologist, and so they often give perspectives from those two sides. I really love it. This is their comment about the relationship between mindfulness and self-compassion. Mindfulness and loving kindness are traditionally described as 2 wings of a bird. With the wing of mindfulness, you develop the capacity to observe non-judgmentally and allow things to be as they already are. With the kindness wing, you cultivate a friendly and compassionate stance toward what is happening, and you need both wings to fly. When mindfulness encounters suffering and sees it clearly for what it is, compassion will naturally arise. The same is true with compassion. Compassion has the seed of wisdom built in. But the natural balance can get uneven at times. Unbalanced mindfulness without kindness can become detached and cold. And unbalanced compassion that is void of seeing things as they really are can become sentimental and too soft. We can train them separately or together, but together they balance each other out and allow us to fly. So, as that said, self-compassion is the heart of mindfulness. And we need mindfulness to be self-compassionate, and self-compassion gives us the sense of safety needed to be mindful. Space creates warmth, and warmth creates space. So they're really... Mindfulness is loving awareness of experience. Self-compassion is loving awareness of the experiencer. Mindfulness asks, what am I experiencing right now? And self-compassion asks, what do I need right now? Mindfulness says, feel your suffering with spacious awareness, while compassion says, be kind to yourself when you suffer. Mindfulness regulates emotions through attention, and self-compassion regulates emotions through affiliation, through things like soothing touch. Mindfulness is calming and self-compassion is warming, which that passage speaks to also. So both pieces, mindfulness and self-compassion, allow us to live with less resistance to ourselves and our lives. And the central paradox of self-compassion is when we struggle, we give ourselves compassion not to feel better, but because we feel bad. It's like having a kid with influenza. You take care of them not to make the influenza go away. You take care of them because they are suffering. And that is what we want to cultivate in our self-compassion practice. We're not trying to get somewhere. We're not trying to make it go away. We are trying to be kind because hurt is part of the human condition. And if we can do that, good things come from that. But we're trying to get away from the trying. We might be trying sometimes, but we're going to practice to get away from that. And we're just about out of time. So home practice, I will send you an email a little earlier in the week this time. New home practices, we already talked about affectionate breathing, soles of the feet, mindfulness in daily life, and self-compassion in daily life. Try to make it pleasant. Things that we enjoy, we continue to do. Things that we don't enjoy, we don't keep doing. So it's really important to try to not bite off more than you can chew, not feel like you have to do a 25-minute sitting meditation if it just makes, if the thought makes your skin crawl. Take small bites. Small bits of practice will add up to just as much good as long sitting practice. And I think we will end with a poem. This is Jessie's poem.
Willingness to experience aloneness, I discover connection everywhere. Turning to face my fear, I meet the warrior who lives within. Opening to my loss, I gain the embrace of the universe. Surrendering into emptiness, I find fullness without end. Each condition I flee from pursues me. Each condition I welcome transforms me, and it becomes itself transformed into its radiant jewel-like essence. I bow to the one who has made it so, who has crafted this master game. To play it is purest delight, to honor its form, true devotion.